Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're investigating a truly mind-blowing demographic anomaly. We're going to look at how physical geography, like the literal shape of the Earth beneath our feet, dictates exactly where millions upon millions of Americans live. Now, you might think that in our modern age, with all our advanced technology, rapid transportation, and sprawling infrastructure, humans can just kind of settle evenly wherever they please. I mean, we've built highways across deserts and skyscrapers into the clouds, right? But as we're about to see when we dig into the numbers, nature is actually still very much in charge. The terrain itself always has the final say on where a civilization can actually thrive. So let's get started.
Okay, let's dive right into this massive puzzle. Why do a staggering 80% of all Americans live east of a seemingly arbitrary line dividing the country? If you were to look at a population map of the United States from space at night, lit up by city lights, you'd see this invisible, razor-sharp boundary that almost perfectly splits the human footprint of the entire nation. It's an anomaly that has baffled a lot of geographers and historians when they look at these population heat maps for the first time. Why is the eastern side incredibly crowded, bustling with dense urban sprawl, while the vast western interior remains remarkably dark and, well, largely empty?
The reality of this demographic split is just visually shocking when you break down the actual percentages. We are leaving a mere 20% of the total population to occupy the entire western half of the United States. Take a second to really think about the sheer mind-boggling scale of the landmass we're talking about here. We're dealing with half of one of the largest countries on planet Earth, millions of square miles of plains, deserts, and valleys, and yet it's home to just 1/5 of the nation's people. It feels like an equation that completely fails to balance out. But wait, the imbalance doesn't even stop there. It actually gets significantly more extreme when we zoom in and look closer at that 20% living in the West. To make things even more incredibly unbalanced, the vast majority of that sparse Western population doesn't even live in the interior. They live right on the very edge of the continent. Specifically, they're densely clustered directly on the coast in California, Oregon, and Washington. The people living in just those three coastal states make up 11% of all Americans. That means out of the 20% of people who live anywhere in the West, more than half of them are crammed right up against the Pacific Ocean, occupying a relatively thin strip of coastal land. So what does that mean for the vast, wide-open interior of the American West? Well, it leads us to a crucial and almost unbelievable point. An astonishingly tiny 9% of Americans live scattered across half of the entire U.S. mainland. Just process that for a second. That gigantic expanse of land stretching from the coastal states all the way back east to the middle of the country holds roughly the same amount of people as New York City alone. You could theoretically take every single person in the bustling boroughs of New York City, pull them out of their apartments and subways, spread them completely out across half of the mainland United States, and that is the exact, incredibly sparse population density we're dealing with. So why is this colossal interior so unbelievably empty?
Let's move into Section 1, the geographic prime suspect, the Rocky Mountains.
To find the main culprit behind this demographic mystery, we actually have to look away from human behavior and look closely at the physical landscape itself. The primary reason for this massive empty zone isn't a lack of trying by ambitious pioneers or, some historical accident. It's the towering, imposing presence of the Rocky Mountains. These magnificent mountains stretch completely across the continent, dividing the land physically. But their true impact isn't just felt on the ground by hikers and wildlife, it's happening high up in the sky. The Rockies are so incredibly tall that they physically interrupt the natural continental weather systems of North America, essentially acting as a natural, impenetrable barrier to the clouds above them. Which brings us to Section 2, the modus operandi, known as the rain shadow effect. So how exactly do these mountains pull off this massive geographical heist and literally steal the rain from half the country? Well, it comes down to a fascinating core mechanism known in meteorology as a rain shadow. This is a geographical effect where mountains are so remarkably high that they completely prevent heavy rain clouds from successfully passing over their peaks. The Rockies basically act like a giant atmospheric shield facing the west coast. When heavy moisture and storm systems roll in from the Pacific Ocean, they hit this jagged mountain range and just stop dead in their tracks. The clouds are forced upward, they cool, and they drop almost all of their water on the coastal side. By the time those weather systems cross the peaks, they're completely depleted, leaving the vast interior on the other side incredibly dry. Let's trace exactly how these complex weather patterns perfectly engineer our dividing line. As we just saw, Pacific clouds are completely blocked in the west by the high altitude of the Rockies, creating that bone-dry interior. Meanwhile, over on the complete opposite side of the country, Eastern precipitation coming off the Atlantic has absolutely no mountainous barrier in its way. That moisture easily penetrates deeply into the eastern mainland, keeping it green and lush. But you might be wondering, why doesn't that abundant eastern rain just keep traveling all the way west to water the interior? Well, it eventually hits an invisible wall created by powerful winds blowing up from the Gulf of Mexico. As these Gulf winds push north, the rotation of the Earth forces them to curve and change direction toward the east. Those Gulf winds simply cannot cross that central dividing line. As a result, the American West gets completely blocked from the Pacific rain by rock and blocked from the eastern rain by wind. And that leads us to Section 3, Agriculture and Human Destiny. So we've thoroughly solved the meteorological mystery, but why does this specific weather pattern absolutely dictate human population? Well, it all boils down to the most basic element of human survival. The extreme lack of precipitation we just tracked creates a massive expanse of incredibly dry land stretching for thousands of miles. That parched earth is naturally highly unsuitable for any kind of large-scale, sustainable agricultural production. You simply cannot rely on rainfall to water vast fields of crops out there. And the golden rule of human civilization has always been simple. Where we cannot reliably grow food, we cannot build densely populated communities. The low population density in the American West isn't a modern preference. It's a direct, unavoidable result of agricultural impossibility. The weather dictates the farming, and the farming permanently dictates the population. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating final thought to take away today. We've seen how the sheer height of rocks can block clouds, change global wind currents, stop farming in its tracks, and ultimately dictate the density and destiny of an entire nation's population. It's a really humbling reminder of our place within the natural world. So I'll leave you with this question to ponder. If massive geographical features can orchestrate the layout of a whole country, what invisible geographic and weather forces are secretly shaping the place you call home? Thank you so much for joining me today for this explainer. Keep exploring, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.